This is a very common IQP, isolated queen pawn structure, where the pawn on d4 is isolated. What does it mean? It's not being protected by another pawn. So, what is your strategy? Well, you want to move your pieces around it. Bishops, for example, line up your rooks on the c-file. Don't exchange pieces. And also sometimes you want to push the pawn in order to get rid of your weakness. From the black side of the board, you want to block the pawn, ideally with a knight, to prevent it from being pushed, and exchange as much as pieces as possible. Because the fewer pieces on the board, the more this pawn becomes a weakness. And it's easier to actually win it. In this game, we will show you how you can actually try to blockade the IQP, the isolated queen pawn. There we go. We will skip through the first part, as this is a Caro-Kann defense, and we will move towards the position where the IQP arises, and that is here. White decided to take the pawn, and black took back with the knight, and we see here the IQP. So let's see how black handles this, and already here we see that black decided to block this pawn with a knight, and that's one of the most ideal setups. Let's see what white does against this. Bishop d3, always a good move, eyeing on the h7 square, developing, castling. Black does the same, moving the rook to the open file, and here black already moves back the knight. For example, if it would have gone b6 to develop the bishop, then you could already take, and when you take back, the rook is very strong on the e file. If you would take back with the queen, then there's this annoying move with the bishop, having a nice pin on this diagonal. So instead, black here decides to put the knight back to f6. This is also the best move according to the computer. And you see that this pawn is not blockaded anymore. Perhaps you can move it when the time is right. a3, trying to gain space. Now going back with the bishop, perhaps setting up a battery. We created a video on batteries in chess. This is also very interesting for you, I think. So check it out. Bishop to a6, preventing the queen to go here and set up the battery. And also developing the bishop, of course. White decides to develop the bishop to g5. Rook c8. Queen d2. And here, white plays queen f4. Going for the attack, not the best move according to the computer, but still quite okay. And now, black decides to blockade the pawn, the IQP, with another piece, the bishop. Queen h4 follows, setting up a battery on this diagonal. g6, because if it wouldn't have done that, for example, a5, then you can take here, and this is a checkmate. g6, question mark. And here, white decides to trade off the bishop on the d5 square. Black takes back, and again, the IQP is being blockaded by the knight. White brings in the rook. Now queen d6, question mark. The computer would have liked to simply trade off the bishops and go h5, but that's not what black liked, and went queen to d6, bishop b3, going on a huge and important diagonal. And here black makes a crucial mistake. White responds with a brilliant move, queen to g4. What happens if you simply take the bishop? Well, then you simply take the pawn on e6, and if the queen goes, for example, to d7, you have a discovered attack on the queen with the check. So if you would take back the rook, you win the queen. And if you would go to d8, then the queen goes to e4, attacking the knight now 2 times. And if you would move it, for example, to f6, then we have another discovered attack here on the king. So this is a check, and the king has to move, and you can simply play back the rook, and you have a dominant position. So instead, king h8 would have been better. Then you can take the knight. If you would take the queen, then we can remove the defender of the bishop, the knight. We attack the rook, and if the bishop moves, for example, to g5, we can take the rook, and we have 2 rooks against a rook and the bishop. So this is winning for white. And if you play g4, kicking away the knight, you have another brilliant option here. Queen to e4, simply giving up the knight on f3. Black takes, and then you push the pawn forward, again removing the defender of the bishop, and this would also be winning. You might ask, okay, what about knight to a5? Well, then we take here, and if the bishop is being taken, then we have a check here. If you move here, this is a checkmate, so that's not good. Okay, let's go back. So that's why black didn't take on g5, but played king to f7. White responded with bishop to h6, rook to e8, and here the best move would have been queen to h3. Feels like a very quiet move. It is, but it's aiming on the h7 square, and if the queen would get in black's position over there, then it's basically game over. For example, a5, let's make a waiting move. Bishop to f4, attacking the queen, and trying to enter black's camp here. Takes, check. Knight to h4, attacking this pawn, trying to defend, and with rook e4, we try to eliminate the defender of the g6 square. After f5, we can simply take the knight. The queen takes, we have a nice fork with the checkmate. And if you take the bishop, then the rook also comes in via the h-file. If you try to trade off queens, of course, we will refuse. Here the knight gets in between. We can simply take up this pawn. This is weak, the rook can come in here. This is simply game over. But instead of doing all that, white took on e6 with the rook. Question mark, not the best move. Black took. Then, this is a beautiful move. Rook e1, brilliancy. What if you take the queen? Well, then this is a check. The queen has to get in between. And this is a checkmate. Because this bishop takes these squares away. This bishop takes these squares away. And the bishop is defended, so this is a checkmate. Instead, the queen has to move aside. And white played back the bishop to f4. Attacking the queen. Queen goes back all the way to d8. A better move would have been h5, attacking white's queen. Now white simply takes black rook in the corner. And also the queen, of course. And after that, the hanging knight, because loose pieces drop off. It's undefended. And we take the knight with a check. And white is a pawn up here. The IQP is still alive. And this is a winning position for white, but not too easy. But after queen d8, as black played, it is way easier for white. White played queen to e8, king to g7, and now white simply takes the knight, which is being defended once, but also being attacked by the queen. g5, and here, after queen f7, black resigned, because this will be a checkmate. In 5, you will simply take the pawn, take back, check, gets in between, takes, queen takes, check, checkmate. This shows how beautifully white played alongside its IQP. With the queen, with the knights, with the bishops. Very well done.